This episode is brought to you by Thermo Fisher Scientific. Go from treat and wait to test and tailor. Use genetic testing to research how to help patients get the right medication dose for them at the right time, the first time. Pharmacogenomics, or PGX, has the potential to help reduce healthcare costs and help protect lives. Physicians and pharmacists can support the movement to integrate PGX into the standard of care, so patients can get tailored treatment with fewer adverse reactions. Thermo Fisher Scientific has been helping to drive PGX research for over a decade, and we continue to invest and participate in collaborations to help make it accessible and affordable. Explore pharmacogenomics at thermofisher.com/PGX education.
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
In a world where one-size-fits-all medications dominate the pharmaceutical industry, precision medicine brings a ray of hope for those seeking customized healthcare. Pharmacists have a unique opportunity to help people in need of specialized testing to ensure medications work as intended. Welcome to Precision Health in PGX, where we unravel the wonders of precision medicine and its potential to revolutionize the way we approach pharmacy care. Get ready to uncover the secrets behind pharmacogenomics and how it's transforming lives, one genome at a time.
I am your host, Dr. Becky Winslow, and you're listening to the Precision Health and PGX podcast. In case you're wondering what happened to the PGX for Pharmacists podcast, you're actually listening to it right now, but only with a different name. With a goal to broaden our listenership outside of pharmacy and pharmacists and broaden our content to include non-pharmacogenomics-based precision health topics, my co-host, Dr. Behnaz Sarami, and I decided to rebrand the podcast so potential listeners wouldn't self-exclude themselves from listening based on the podcast name.
Hey, this is Behnaz. We're super excited about this new change. No different than what we did on PGX for Pharmacists podcast. We'll continue to explore all things pharmacogenomics related, including pharmacists' role in PGX, and our mission still includes educating and advocating for the broader topic of precision medicine. We'll continue to accomplish this mission through extensive interviews with highly qualified and well-experienced industry leaders.
Thanks, Behnaz. So today's special guest is Hilary Goeckner. Hilary, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Hilary G. Goeckner. I'm a director of state and local campaigns with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, or ACS-CAN. We're the public policy affiliate of the American Cancer Society.
Thanks so much for introducing yourself. We're really fortunate to have you as a guest today. As a pharmacogenomics access and reimbursement specialist, I've been wanting to cover today's topic on the podcast for a while now, and that is biomarker testing's importance and the current status of biomarker testing coverage and legislation in the United States today. So just for our audience's reference, just to get you up to speed in case you're not aware, prescribers often use biomarkers to help determine the best treatment for a patient, but not all communities are benefiting from the latest advancements in biomarker testing. And precision medicine, due to payers' differences in biomarker coverage and reimbursement policies. Biomarker testing coverage and reimbursement is critical for pharmacogenomics testing to become a standard of care in both oncologic and non-oncologic medication therapy management, and most important, for patients to realize pharmacogenomics testing's benefits. Unfortunately, payers have traditionally not voluntarily paid for clinically utile biomarker testing, but fortunate for patients now, state legislatures have begun working to ensure more health plan payers cover this testing. So Hilary, could you please start off by introducing our audience to the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network and its mission, in general and specific to biomarker testing access, how does ACS CAN's mission align with the broader goals of improving healthcare access and outcomes?
Sure. So, as the public policy affiliate of the American Cancer Society, ACS CAN is working at the federal, state, and local level to advance proven policies to end cancer as we know it for everyone. So, we're working on cancer prevention policies like tobacco control, access to care, making sure people have affordable insurance that covers the care that they need, access to screenings, and then also that they're able to get the cancer treatment that they need, and supporting cancer research funding. So there's a lot of really important policies and laws that can help with addressing cancer. And so that's our mission, that's our work. And we do this working with local, state, and federal policymakers from all political backgrounds to do the right thing for cancer patients and their families. And biomarker testing is increasingly important in cancer care and in helping cancer patients get the right treatment at the right time. So this is a big priority for us to make sure that all patients who can benefit from biomarker testing are able to get it.
That's a wonderful mission, and needless to say, very much needed. Can you tell us about your role in particular at the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, and what inspired you to join the organization? I'm sure that the mission, that's evident, but could you elaborate on that for us?
Sure. So, like everyone, I have friends and family who've been impacted by cancer and care very deeply about the mission and making sure everyone has an equal opportunity to prevent, detect, and survive cancer. And so ACS CAN has a grassroots army, if you will, of volunteers across the country who are so dedicated to this work and so impactful in speaking with their lawmakers and advocating for the policies that will make a difference for patients and their families.
Well, we appreciate everything you guys are doing at the organization yourself regarding this really awesome mission. We appreciate that. Can you tell us how ACS CAN is executing its mission? That's a lot to do, right?
Yeah, so I'm on a team that's focused primarily on state legislative campaigns. Federal office holders and policies often get a lot of the attention, but there's so much important work that happens at the state level and in state capitals. So we've got a government relations director and a grassroots manager working in every single state to lead campaigns to pass laws and policies that can help with cancer prevention and access to care. And so my focus is primarily on equitable access to biomarker testing. I work on some other access to care issues as well, fertility preservation, clinical trials, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of enthusiasm and interest in our work around biomarker testing. Over the last 2.5, 3 years, we've been working to introduce legislation to align insurance coverage policies across different health plans to make sure that plans are covering the testing that patients need and that doctors are ordering, because insurance coverage is not keeping up with the latest advances in biomarker testing. So there's really standard of care testing that patients are missing out on. And there are a number of challenges to ensuring that every patient who needs biomarker testing can get it. But insurance coverage is a big gap and an opportunity where state legislation can make a big change. So the legislation that we're working on requires coverage of biomarker testing for diagnosis, treatment, appropriate management, and ongoing monitoring of a disease or condition. So this isn't specific to cancer. If and only if that testing is supported by certain evidence that's defined in the bill. So that's FDA approved or cleared tests, labeled indications on FDA approved drugs, warnings and precautions on FDA approved drugs. So pharmacogenomic testing very much falls under this biomarker testing legislation. CMS coverage determinations, local coverage determinations for Medicare contractors, and then also nationally recognized clinical practice guidelines that providers rely on, like those from NCCN. So the idea is that these laws are not set in time, but they will follow the evidence and cover testing when it's proven and necessary to guide patient treatment decisions.
So, going back a little, why are the plans not following the guidelines, like let's say such as NCCN guidelines to begin with, and why is there that gap to start off? Like it makes sense everything you're saying, so it does, but doesn't make sense why the gap is there. So if you can kind of explain why are we here?
Sure. So I can't speak for insurers and how they come to these decisions, but the unfortunate reality is that they're not keeping up with the guidelines. I will say some papers have analyzed plans and looked, and they overwhelmingly refer to NCCN guidelines. They say we consider NCCN guidelines. One paper I'm thinking of, 91% consulted or referenced NCCN guidelines, but 71% of those plans were more restrictive than the guidelines. So it doesn't matter to the patient or the provider if you're considering them, if you're not following them, because oncology providers overwhelmingly rely on NCCN guidelines to make sure that their patients are benefiting from the latest science and staying up to date with the care that patients need.
So do you have any ideas of potentially what their thought process is? I know you're not in their brains and you don't know that, but just doing this for a while and being in that space, do you have any idea what potential reasons there could be?
The concern we always hear from insurers is about cost, and the cost of testing. So I would venture that might factor into their thinking. However, a number of studies have shown that biomarker testing and pharmacogenomic testing especially can lead to cost savings and cost avoidance. The challenge is that those savings are sometimes over a couple of years or even a longer period of time. And particularly for patients in active cancer treatment, they might be changing between different insurance plans. Either because they have to leave a job or they shift to a Medicaid plan or they move or whatever. So sometimes it can be hard to for payers to voluntarily cover that testing, knowing that they might not see the benefit. However, with legislation like this, when the plans are following the same rules, some of those costs and benefits are spread around the plans, because many plans right now are covering much of this testing for many of the patients who need it. And what the goal with this legislation is to level the playing field and have all the plans follow the same rules, so that you can have some consistency and equitable access across different plans.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because you're exactly right. Someone's insurer should not be one of their social determinants of health, especially when it comes to cancer care.
Yeah, and we see really significant disparities and inequities in cancer outcomes already. When cancers are diagnosed, how long people survive, what kind of care they're getting, by race, income, insurance type, geography. And as biomarker testing becomes more important in cancer care and as treatments become more precise, we could see those disparities in outcomes and survival increase if the only patients getting biomarker testing have the means to pay out of pocket or are going to an academic medical center or have the right insurance. And so policy solutions like this are really important to advance equitable access.
I agree. Absolutely. Based on my research, Hilary, I was certain that you would name ACS can increasing the number of states for which their legislators require biomarker testing coverage for all state regulated plans as a key legislative victory, or maybe we haven't even gotten to that question. What are your legislative victories, and can you name the states for us? Maybe just throw out a few names. I know there's quite a list now of states that the laws do require coverage. Maybe just share a few of those and we can refer our audience to a longer list.
Sure. So we've worked with lawmakers across the country to advance legislation to expand insurance coverage of proven and necessary testing. So similar laws have been passed in 20 states to date. This is really across the gamut geographically, politically: California, Texas, Georgia, New York, Illinois, Rhode Island. So big states, small states, red states, blue states. Huge interest from lawmakers and a lot of success in a really short period of time. And so as I touched on, this legislation requires coverage of biomarker testing, but not just anything that calls itself biomarker testing. There are very clear guardrails limiting both the circumstances for testing to diagnosis, treatment, management, and monitoring of a disease or condition, if and only if that testing is supported by one of the sources of evidence defined in the law. And that's typically FDA approved and cleared tests, labeled indications and warnings on FDA approved drug labels, Medicare coverage determinations, both national and local, and nationally recognized clinical practice guidelines like NCCN, CPIC, and others.
Okay. And that's and I think we should maybe pause here also and say that, biomarker is a very general term. Biomarkers are not just genetics related. So, although we talk a lot about genetics, can you maybe expand for our audience on the term biomarker and how inclusive it is? And like you said, some could use the term biomarker when maybe it's not appropriate. Yes.
Yeah. So biomarker is something that can be measured in your body. There are many, many things that could fall fairly under the term biomarker. However, in cancer care, we're typically talking about genetic mutations, protein expression. This is both inherited genes and very often somatic or acquired mutations. And importantly, this is where the guardrails in the legislation make a big difference. This is not intended to cover testing for screening purposes. So we're not talking about screening the general population looking for cases of disease where there's no, signs or symptoms. But this is really important diagnostic testing that allows doctors to subtype someone's cancer. So it's not just you have breast cancer or you have lung cancer. We're going to do trial and error on all these drugs that might work, might not, see how it goes. But understanding, okay, yes, you have non-small cell lung cancer, but you have a KRAS positive or EGFR mutation. Biomarkers are usually known by 3 or 4 letters and or numbers. And so some of these are inherited from mom and dad, but most often, many of the markers we're talking about are acquired over your lifetime. So it's not something that you had at birth. And they're causing that cancer to grow. And so the targeted treatments go after that mutation and can effectively slow down the cancer, and often have fewer side effects because they're not as kind of broad as traditional chemotherapy, radiation that go after all fast-growing cells in your body.
I'm glad you made that or differentiated between somatic and inherited for our audience purposes, because that is an important distinction. And also the fact that you're not trying to get coverage for screening tests, because in my experience, payers, just like you said, they want diagnostic, not screening tests. They want to pay for those versus screening. And again, because they want to realize the return on their investment into that test over the time that the patient is a beneficiary in their plan. And although Medicare has typically a patient is in the plan longer, 18 months for like employer sponsored plans is my understanding. That's the average span for a beneficiary, on a commercial plan. So, like you said,
screening tests are very important. And we also support work to advance access to, guideline indicated screening tests as well. It's just kind of a separate category of work. And we don't, want to go too big with what this one piece of legislation is
Yes.
trying to accomplish. So like, multi-cancer early detection tests could be considered a biomarker test, but the purposes of that type of testing would be a screening test. So looking at general population or what have you to look for cases of cancer where there are no signs or symptoms. So that's separate from a diagnostic test that someone has cancer or suspected cancer or other condition, and we're trying to better understand that diagnosis and inform the treatment. And, on the cost front, often biomarker testing can help patients, avoid unnecessary treatments that are often really expensive, and sometimes avoid over treatment. So some patients won't benefit from certain treatments or will have a much less aggressive disease and will have the information to decide, I don't want to over treat this and, have some treatment that's just going to make me miserable and maybe won't give me any clinical benefit. So it allows for more efficient care delivery. Sometimes, it identifies patients are a really good fit for a really expensive treatment, but that's not always the case.
Yes. And what I hear you describing is clinical utility. And as research comes out, clinical utility research comes out, that's what's going to help push payers to see the value. I mean, we're not here to try to beat up payers today. I work with payers. Their argument is valid. They want to see return on their investment, and they want to see real data, to support that, making that decision. So, just to make clear that, we understand their perspective. We're just trying to do what we can to make sure that our patients get taken care of. So
I have a follow-up question, if that's okay, Becky.
Sure.
Yeah, so here's a very one-off, or maybe it's already done, or maybe this is a dumb question, but is there room for collaboration or conversations to be had with pharmaceutical companies ahead of when they're, when they're developing a drug that's suited for some type of treatment that would require some biomarkers that can be mentioned that could kind of potentially. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Like, unless they're already in the package insert of some of those, but it's still not looked at.
My understanding is that a lot of targeted treatments are getting FDA approval at the same time as a companion diagnostic.
Yes.
So the labeled indications on FDA approved labels kind of gets at that companion diagnostic. And so often they receive FDA approval at the same time.
Yep.
Sure. So yeah, I think the biomarker testing is increasingly important for accessing those newer treatments, but also biomarker testing is really important for accessing clinical trials. Increasingly, trials are recruiting patients based on their biomarkers. So rather than, this is a lung cancer trial and this is a prostate cancer trial and this is a breast cancer trial, this is a trial for people with a ROS1 mutation. And it doesn't matter where in your body we found the cancer. We are investigating. We think this drug or treatment will be effective for this type of tumor wherever it occurred.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Absolutely. I mean, because companion diagnostics are very important. I mean, we're having an episode on breast cancer. The treatments for breast cancer are an example of where companion diagnostics are available before the patient consumes the medication, to make sure that they're taking the medication that's going to work for their type of breast cancer.
Exactly.
So absolutely. Good question, Banaz. Good question.
Yeah.
So back to the state coverage, can you elaborate for us on how state laws differ as far as biomarker coverage goes?
Sure. So generally speaking, most of these state laws are very similar. They'll look a little bit different state to state, just to kind of, each state has their own style and they're fitting it into existing statutes, but largely they have very similar language on the definitions, on the circumstances when testing needs to be covered, and on the sources of evidence that testing needs to meet.
Right.
But of those 20 states, 15 currently apply to both state-regulated private plans. So large employer-sponsored plans are not subject to any state laws. This isn't unique to biomarker testing, but they are only impacted by federal laws. But individual marketplace plans, small employer-sponsored plans, things like that are subject to state laws. And then state Medicaid programs vary significantly state to state. So 15 of those 20 states apply to the whole state regulated market. The other 5 are slightly more piecemeal, and this is done for either procedural or political reasons, but we're working to continue to address the rest of the market. So Connecticut and Florida looked specifically at Medicaid and state employee health plan. Arkansas, Louisiana, and Colorado passed plans that apply to the private market. So we're continuing work in those states to get the missing piece of the puzzle, if you will.
And that's a great way to differentiate the plans. And people need to, I found that there's a lack of understanding in the U.S. of the complex U.S. healthcare payer system. There are community plans, there's state plans, there's commercial plans, there are exchange plans, so many different plans, and they can have different guidelines. It can all be called XYZ healthcare coverage, but each individual in the plan, within a certain group is going to have possibly different coverage based on the group they're in. And I think there's really maybe not an appreciation for how complex the healthcare coverage, I don't know if system or marketplace or landscape is the right word.
Yes, it's very, very messy, very complicated.
Yes. So thanks for pointing that out to our audience. So what are you seeing in other states? How do you see the landscape of biomarker testing legislation evolving in the next few years? Where do we go from here?
Sure.
What's it look like?
So we've seen legislative victories in those 20 states I've mentioned. Legislation has been introduced in about 10 additional states already. Didn't get all the way through the process yet, though. New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Ohio are still working for this year and have bills that are active and could pass before the end of the year, though we are running out of time. Typically, state legislative sessions happen in the first half of the year. So we'll see a lot of activity early in 2025. And we're continuing to work to advance this legislation across the country. So hopefully we'll have a much bigger number than 20 this time next year.
Let's hope so. I'd like to have you back in a year so that we can say,
sure,
we can say you guys did it, right?
Yeah, these are exciting achievements. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And
awesome
patient stories can also be truly moving the needle when it comes to building support for clinical utility healthcare products and services. So can you share some success stories where biomarker testing really significantly impacted patient treatment outcome?
Yeah, so patient stories are so important to all the work we do, particularly with this issue in kind of making it meaningful to lawmakers who often don't have necessarily a background in healthcare or science. And individual stories of a patient who, got on the right treatment after being told they had 3 to 6 months to live and they're doing great 6 or 7 years later. That is so, so powerful and moving to lawmakers, and makes it much easier for them to stand up to the opposition on a policy like this and vote to get patients the access that they need. So patient stories are hugely helpful. We also like to feature provider stories. from, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, social workers who could talk about the experiences and what they see every day and the challenges they're up against with, limitations in coverage policies, not following the science and what it means for their patients. So we make it easy for people to get involved and love to feature those stories. We have a whole bunch of patient and provider stories that we'll have a link in the notes to lots of 2 and 3 minute videos we've created to
love that. Thank you.
illustrate this issue for people.
Awesome. And I think Banaz, and I'm speaking for Banaz, but I think we can both say, as pharmacists.
Thanks for always speaking for me, Becky.
You can agree, you can disagree.
No, I love it. I love it.
I know from my experience working as a pharmacist in direct patient care, hearing patient stories are what really, because we were right there on the front lines and going to bat for those patients and fighting for those patients to get the correct medication that they needed. And really, I don't know about Banaz. I won't speak on this part, Banaz.
No, come on. You and I think alike.
But it really inspired me to try to work more on a population health level to try to get patients the treatment that was the best for them. The patient stories are absolutely, they are very impactful. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to share those. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and very important objective for this episode, Hilary, and we would be remiss not to do this, is to empower our listeners to get involved in biomarker testing coverage advocacy. We want them to walk away today not only being maybe better educated about biomarker testing and the current landscape for coverage, but we want to inspire them to get active, get out there and help. So how can listeners get involved in advocating for this testing coverage? And I'm sure ACS CAN offers resources to support individuals that want to contribute to the cause.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would encourage everyone to visit fightcancer.org. You can click on your state. There's a little drop-down menu and get connected with our staff and volunteers in your state to get involved. We work on lots of important cancer policy issues. Biomarker testing is a hot topic in a whole bunch of states right now. So we'd love to get connected with folks. And we host a day at the Capitol in every state legislature each year. And have lots of other opportunities to get involved. So we'll let you know when there's a hearing coming up, if we need a pharmacist or a doctor to come talk about this issue and talk about what it means to patients, or someone to speak to the local media, or, we have easy action alerts to contact your state lawmakers. So encourage everyone to visit fightcancer.org and get involved and get connected with us. We would love to work with you.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I went to the website, and on the very far right top, it says my state. Is so easy. You just put in your state and it pops up. So that's great. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, making it easy is great. So thanks again, Hilary. We could talk about this all day. We could make several episodes on this topic, elaborate on, the individual segments that we focused on, but we've got to wrap up for today. So could you please let our listeners know how they can reach out to you if they have questions or want more information? What's your preferred method of communication?
Sure. Folks are welcome to email me. It's hilary.gee@cancer.org, 1L in Hilary, or reach out through the ACS CAN website and we'll get in touch with you.
All right. So again, thank you, Hilary, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. Without our faithful listeners, we wouldn't have such a successful podcast, and for that, we're grateful for you guys.
Yeah, and we do a lot of PGXing on here on Precision Health and PGX podcast, PGX Science, the clinical application and business, and we hope you learned something today. As always, you can visit us on PGX4, the number 4, rx.com to listen to all our episodes. We love to hear from you, so what can we teach you? Drop us a message on LinkedIn and let us know, and please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you prefer to listen to your podcast. So until next time, here's to moving the trial and error from medicine.